Hey, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about the perfect knife. This is an electrician's knife because electricians use it, and it's pretty common sense. My first experience with this knife is the military designation for this was a TL-29. And so that's what I was looking for, to put a TL-29 into my collection. And so I got a hold of this knife. Now, the crazy thing about that is before I started knife collecting, I was doing remodeling, and I actually saw electricians using this knife, but I never really liked this blade, and so I just discounted it, right? This is the blade that the electricians use. They would strip wires down here where it was sharp, and they would use this screwdriver blade here to tie the wires into the panel. And there were little tiny screws that they put the wire around, and they would, use a knife in that fashion. But when I got the TL-29, I realized, holding it in my hand has a regular jack pattern to it, design. It feels your hands really good. And I thought, wow, this would be the perfect knife if you had this pattern right here, but you had a smaller secondary blade and the main blade was locking. And that's what I think a perfect knife would be. And so there's a bunch of knives on the table here. We're gonna show you how this thing evolved, and whether it really is a perfect knife and whether it really exists.
What are you doing?
What? I'm money laundering. Hope I don't get in trouble.
Tell him where you got that money from.
I stole it from Sherry's car. All of this was in her car.
That was my stash.
We're going to get 8 miles per gallon better mileage without all this weight being in there. All right, welcome back to the Fortified Castle. Hi to all my viewers. Yeah, the perfect knife. So I gave you a little story on this knife right here. How I really thought if you made a few modifications for this, it would be the perfect knife. And so there's a bunch of knives on the table here, and I've looked for this. Is there a regular jack that has a nice main blade on it, about the same size as a TL-29, and two-bladed with a smaller pen blade? Yeah, there is, right? It's actually a popular design, but there's none that have a lock-in main blade, and so you get kind of an amalgamation of knives where you can get some of the features but not all the features, and it just doesn't really exist. But I think it would be a really nice knife if you had this regular this is a sleeve board pattern, but the only difference between this and a regular jack is you have a square on top. So it doesn't matter to me whether it's a sleeve board or regular jack, but around the size of this electrician's knife, which is 3 3/4 inches. That's a really good size. It fills your hand. With 2 blades, the knife is wide enough, but actually it could be even wider. So I want to show you an old knife here. Let me see. Yeah, I think this is it. Ooh, look at that Coca-Cola. Ooh. So this is a George Weston home. Nope, it's a Robeson. That's what it is. So this is about 4 7/8 inches. It's a sleeve board pattern. Same thing, it's a jackknife. You have a large spear point blade, and you have the smaller um, pin blade. And this knife dates between 1910 and 1920, and it's a jumbo knife. So the difference is, if you look at these two knives, they're both two-bladed jacks, but this is a lot thicker, and that's what a jumbo knife is. They were just a little bigger for guys who had big hands, but this just feels your hand great with with this jumbo size here. And what is that? So you're looking at 5/8. So if you had a 5/8 handle that slowly swelled out down to here, I wonder what it is down here. Probably same. Ooh, yeah, it's a little bigger than 5/8 down here, but it's really a perfect jackknife, and this knife is fine in this pattern, but it would be great, wouldn't it, to have a lock and blade on this? And so uh, there's another one here I have. Where's my other one? This is my other jumbo knife at the George Westinghouse. It's a little bigger. It's 4 inches, but same concept. You have a nice spear point main blade and a smaller pin blade and a regular jack pattern that just fills your hand great. And why don't they put a lock and blade on these? And so let's fast forward right now and look at one that does have a lock and blade. So this is a light trapper. It's 3 3/4 inches. That's the size that we're looking for here. And it has a lock and blade. And if you open it up, you have a nice little lock and blade on here. So these things existed, but they kind of existed in this type of format where you had a single lock and blade and not a double blade. I don't know of a single pattern that had, 2 blades. This, of course, is a serpentine pattern, and it's not bad, but really the regular jack fits your hand better. And so you had this kind of in between thing where, but in a different pattern where you had the lock and blade, and that's kind of what you get. You either get a lock and blade and no secondary blade, or you get 2 blades and none of them lock. This is a copper lock from Case, and I've said this for a long time. This is the perfect EDC blade. It's the perfect size for EDC. You have a lock and blade, so you don't have to worry about this thing closing on you when you're getting crazy at work. And this is a nice pattern. And it is not a regular jack pattern, but if you look at it close, it kind of is. So you've got that swell here down towards the center, and it just curls up a little bit. And the reason for that is Case took this pattern, which is a copper lock, and they crossed it with a trapper pattern to create this knife right here. And so that's why you have this swell that's a little bigger than the copper lock. And again, you can see this copper lock has got 2 blades, and it really is kind of like a regular jack pattern, except you have a copperhead bolster, which is no big deal. It doesn't really, the copperhead bolster doesn't change the pattern, but you see it starts off small at the tail of the knife and slowly gets wider towards the head of the knife. And that's exactly what these regular jacks do. They're small at the tail and they get bigger at the end of the pattern. Here's another one. This is a recent offering from Case. It's the 005 pattern, and it's a medium regular jack. In this case, it's got, of course, the razor blade on it. One arm bandit blade, actually. But there's your, secondary blade. But again, you got your two blades in regular jack pattern, but you don't have the main blade locking. And that's what we're looking for to be, I think, the perfect knife. And that just fits great in your hand. And both of these are a little larger. Another offering is this Bear & Son medium Barlow. Same thing. It's a regular jack pattern, single blade, fits your hand great. Just a great, perfect fit for a knife. But I think to make it perfect, it needs a secondary small pen knife. So you don't have to change knives if you're doing different tasks and you need a smaller blade. And I think the main blade should lock, so you have that ultimate safety feature. And it just always seemed crazy to me that you had this electrician's knife. It made sense. This is electricians really get in there, they're turning like this in their hand. And, it's a screwdriver, and it made sense for this to lock, but just in a regular EDC knife, not a specialized tool like this is, it just made sense. It would make more sense to have the main blade locking. I want to show you a couple more patterns of how this knife has existed, over the years. So I showed you the old pattern, the Westinghouse 1770s, 1780s, the Robeson 1910 to 1921 on that one. And then you have the TL29. This pattern is formalized around after World War One. When it first came out, it was 3 5/8 inches, and so they added a 1/4 inch. And this is the way the pattern has stayed. You can still get electrician knives today. I'll show you some pictures of them towards the end of the video. But then you have, this is a Camillus pattern 27. It's just a 3 3/4 inch jackknife with two blades. That's the Camillus right there. This is 1946 to 1956 is the date on this knife. And then you have the Case 31 pattern. So in this 31.5 pattern, it's just a two-bladed jack in that 3 3/4 inch range. Just perfect. Why don't you have a locking blade on there? And then it'd be a perfect knife. Here's a Robeson, same time frame, around the 1950s, same pattern, two-bladed jack. And I'll show you one more, the Case 31 SH. So this was SH for the sheep's foot blade. It had a sheep's foot blade on it, and these they called Boston Whalers. Same thing. It's the same pattern knife as this right here, 3 3/4. They just put a sheep's foot blade on it and called it a Whaler, and the blade's a little shorter too, as you can see. But walnut scales on it. So that pattern has existed through time, but not the most popular pattern. I've always thought that these size knives were just perfect and worked great. This razor knife, I think, has been really popular. The 005 pattern per case is an old pattern, but they just brought it back in this knife, in the razor knife, in 23, I think. And then the copper head was just a much more pocketable version and slightly different. You can see right there, this is a little bigger. The copper lock's 4 7/8. You can see it at the end there. It's a little bigger, but two-bladed jack with a slightly different design, a little more palm filling design here on the end. And then the copper lock, of course, is a little bigger, and it's a 4-inch version. And then you have a locking blade on it. and this is an improved version of this one right here. So yeah, what do you guys think? I I think if you could, get this knife with a smaller blade, like these regular jack patterns, these old reliable regular jack patterns, but have the main blade a lock and blade with just a little liner lock like this, not very obtrusive, doesn't bother your fingers or your hands, and just that to me would be the perfect knife. What do you think? I think it would be the perfect knife.